I'm your gender balance. Okay. So to keep to a time schedule, it's 5:01, and I think I'd like to start with our event, Coordinated Action for Sustainable Future, exploring Rio Convention's synergies. So my name is Christina Munzer, and I work in the Department of Agriculture, Fisheries, and Forestry. That's all right. And I am pleased to be here with esteemed colleagues who are going to share their reflections on how what synergies across the Rio Conventions mean to them and their work. I'm afraid that Secretary Mike Kaiser is not able to be here with us due to a last-minute schedule conflict. So you'll have to bear with me. But I do want to just welcome you to this event and just bear with me as I kind of walk us through some of the things that Australia is doing. It's an important conversation, clearly, that we're having about aligning our work with climate action, with efforts to protect nature and restore land. And I think it might be worth just setting a little bit of a scene about what Australia is doing in integrating its climate and nature priorities, and how these efforts contribute to our shared global goals. But first, I want to begin it by acknowledging an important development today, the launch of RISE, the Resilient Agriculture Implementation for Net Zero Degradation by Brazil's Ministry of Agriculture and Livestock. This is a fantastic, excellent example of practical action that will support our shared efforts towards a resilient and sustainable food system, one that meets the needs of a growing population while protecting the environment. Australia welcomes this leadership and supports the RISE plan, so thank you very much. It shows the kind of cooperation really that we need to see and innovation that we need to have to tackle the challenges ahead. So we know that climate, biodiversity, and land are deeply connected. Tackling them delivers bigger benefits together for people and nature, and we're acting on that principle. So maybe a couple things to be aware of from the Australia perspective is our nationally determined contribution sets an ambitious 2035 emissions reduction target of 62 to 70% below 2005 levels, and that reaffirming Australia's net zero commitment to net zero by 2050. So our NDC emphasizes that addressing climate change is crucial for protecting Australia's unique natural environment. It shows how our climate action complements our ocean and biodiversity commitments, and our restoration efforts directly support both mitigation and adaptation. And our National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan, or NBSAP, address the drivers of biodiversity decline and aligns with the Target 8 of the Global Biodiversity Framework, and that's to minimize climate impacts on biodiversity and build resilience. Of course, these challenges are global. The 3 Rio Conventions on climate, biodiversity, and desertification give us a powerful framework for us to align efforts and avoid trade-offs. By linking these actions to implement these conventions at a national level, we can accelerate outcomes that benefit climate, biodiversity, and land. We have nature-based solutions and initiatives like the Ocean and Climate Change Dialogue that show how collaboration works in practice. Indigenous knowledge also reminds us these issues are deeply connected, and the solutions must reflect that. The Local Communities and Indigenous Peoples Platform, or LCIP, is a great example of how nature can be incorporated alongside climate action. So we're investing in such things through the Natural Heritage Trust to support climate-smart agriculture, carbon and biodiversity markets, and sustainable land management. These practices all drive agricultural productivity, competitiveness, and sustainability, showing that we can deliver cost-effective investment with benefits for climate, nature, and land. And we are incentivizing landholders to restore land and biodiversity, delivering climate benefits at the same time. But the challenges we face are urgent, but they are also an opportunity to build a future that is sustainable, resilient, and equitable, all while aligning our efforts in a way that maximizes return on effort and investment. So Australia is committed to working with all parties to strengthen synergies across the Rio Conventions and ensure that our collective actions deliver for people, nature, and climate alike. But I'd like to stop there and stop talking about Australia. And I'd love to introduce our amazing folks here that have come and joined us on this panel, and we're really happy you're here. I'd like to first introduce George Gaetano Jr. So George is the Coordinator General for Climate Change and Sustainable Development at Brazil's Ministry of Agriculture and Livestock. George is an expert in animal health and veterinary epidemiology, is a published author, and was previously a professor at the University of Brasilia. Welcome, George. Maya Rajasekaran. Maya is the Managing Director of the Americas at the Alliance of Biodiversity International and the International Center for Tropical Agriculture. Maya leads the Alliance's strategy, engagement, and operations in Latin America and the Caribbean, and holds an extensive experience in building partnerships that bridge science, policy, and practice to enable systemic change. This is terrific. Welcome as well to the panel. Christian Barrozueta. Christian is a leading climate diplomacy and international development expert with over 10 years of experience spanning human rights, climate action, and sustainable development. He serves as Climate and Biodiversity Officer at the World Rural Forum, a global network representing over 75 million family farmers across 90 countries. Thank you, Christian. And finally, Michael. Michael Taylor is a sixth-generation farmer from Eastern Australia in the New England tablelands in New South Wales. Michael runs an ultra-fine merino sheep, beef cattle, farm forestry, and agritourism enterprise, and is known for his work to advance multi-purpose forests on farms with natural and social co-benefits and large carbon sequestering potential. Is there anything else you don't do? He is a 2024 Nuffield Scholar and won the 2022 ABC Rural Australian Farmer of the Year Award for his future-focused management of his diverse family farm business while building on the agroforestry work of his family since the 1980s. All right, so we've got a pretty powerful crew here. Let's get on with it. Maybe my first question will be for George, if that's okay. So George, we understand that identifying synergies across the conventions is a priority for the Brazilian government. Could you please share how Brazil has approached promoting interconnections between climate action, biodiversity, and land management? And you may choose, if you want, to also expand on how maybe the newly launched RAIS plan may be able to also contribute to those synergies over time. So over to you, George. Thank you.
Thank you very much for inviting me for this panel. It's a very exciting theme. Thank you for the support of Australia to RAIS initiative launched today. I think that one of the big challenges of the agriculture and livestock facing the necessity to attend to both drives, food security and sustainability, is how to produce more in the lands already dedicated to agriculture and livestock. How to produce more there. And in this case, the recovery of degraded lands seems to be a good way for the countries which has the same challenge as Brazil. In our country, for instance, the livestock were an activity in the past that could be performed in areas in which we didn't have infrastructure, because cattle can walk. can go and can return. And in this case, we began to have large areas of pasture. And once these areas become to be served by more infrastructure, cattle have been produced more concentrated or give space for the agriculture. This is a normal way, but we need to accelerate this process, this natural process in our country, and we need to qualify this process. And in this sense, RAIZ is a very important global initiative that count with our support and the support of many different people, many different countries, organizations, ICS, and FOLU, and Agroeconomy, and other partners. And this is an umbrella for different national projects that can be linked with two different things. One, recover degraded lands, which is an interest of other conventions. Because the land, the recovery of the land, the activity of the land, the biodiversity of the land is the first step to have a biodiversity of natural species, plants and animals, and a good health of our plants and livestock production, and human health too. So it's a very interesting subject for the three Rio conventions in this moment. And well, RAIZ is this umbrella I mentioned. Many different countries has its own projects or programs inside that can be linked with this main this global initiative. And what we are trying to do in this case is to put good projects and meeting with financiers for these projects. And in a concrete way, we have, in this case, a mapping of degraded lands. And in these degraded lands, which one have the more potential for use in agriculture and livestock in many different countries across the world.
Thank you so much, George. I think that's really interesting. I mean, you brought in a lot of content there around food security and productivity, land restoration, and knowing that it needs to flow, obviously, on the key conventions of CCD, CDD, and of course, UNFCCC. So there's this idea about acceleration, right, through the RAIZ program and all the partnerships that are part of that implementation, right? So maybe, if Maya, if you're okay, I want to direct the next question to you. Just in keeping with what George said, how can research-based organizations like the Alliance help countries operationalize synergies that you might find in initiatives like RAIZ across the Rio conventions? Maybe if you could just expand on that a bit.
Thank you. It's great to be joining this conversation, and also thanks to Canada. Canada has also been a big supporter of the international agricultural research and development, so we are very grateful for that. I want to build on the RAIZ initiative. We are a research for development organization, so science for impact. So our role is to come up with data, evidences, and tools and some policy support to implement big initiatives like RAIZ, Alliance of Biodiversity, and SEAT are part of the RAIZ initiative. So our role is to really, I'm going to be very, very specific examples like restoration. Restoration is a key component of it, but the restoration we also need to be very science-driven. And the type of trees we want to plant in a landscape, what type of trees. So we have tools called Diversity for Restoration, which really builds on thousands of trees data, which is basically ecological sensitiveness and genetic data to really advise what is the right tree to plant or right thing to plant in a given landscape. That needs to be thought through also from a longer term perspective. For if you're looking at a livestock system, it might be, it needs to go with agro-silvopastoral system, which is adequate for that particular system. But we are looking about the landscape is much more suitable for coffee, maybe we should be looking at about shade trees. The shade trees are very different type of trees, and it should be native trees from that particular location. And if you're looking at fruit trees, they give a different sort of benefits to the community. So selection of trees is going to be one of the critical aspects for restoration. It is a long-term process, so that, and there's evidence has shown that if you use the tool effectively and making decisions, the survival rate of the trees and long-term benefits are from 20 to 50% increase. And choosing the right trees and the right plants for restoration, including tropical forages, which is pasture. There are millions of hectares of degraded pastures in Latin America. There is new research and new varieties of tropical forages, which actually deep-rooting forages which capture more carbon in this land. So there are opportunities to actually kind of replace some of the systems and understand what kind of incentives can be brought into the table so that farmers have the ability to replace some of these degraded pastures. So overall, if you have the, again, if using tools like diversity for restoration and in association with many partners, Brazilian government and other partners, we would be able to restore more carbon. So that's very speaks directly to the climate Paris Treaty. And if it improves the soil structure, it speaks very much directly to the desertification convention and biodiversity in broadly. So because if we have the right native trees and native plants in the landscape, it actually broadly increases biodiversity, not just above ground biodiversity, also the below ground diversity. There is more and more research showing how the below ground biological diversity is critically important to understand how the ecosystem functioning. So overall, quite a lot of benefits coming from that, and we are absolutely delighted to be part of this initiative from a science angle and coming in that necessary support. And again, research always evolve. So when you take any project, successful project to scale, there are always new needs and new tools and metrics. So we also kind of looking to provide that monitoring, verification support for big initiative to make sure that the measurements are credible, and so that the market can also look at it and saying that, are we capturing enough carbon really here? Where's the data? And also kind of bringing the risk dimension lower for new investors to come in. So glad to be joining this initiative with the Brazil and other colleagues.
That's terrific. Thank you so much, Maya. So really interesting. We've got sort of the framework. We've got some mapping potentially. We've got some tools. We've got some ways of being able to really better understand an ecosystem so it's smarter, it's more efficient approaches. Maybe I heard a lot about trees. This might be a really good segue to you, Michael. How can agroforestry systems be designed to simultaneously address biodiversity loss, soil degradation, and climate mitigation? Do you think you could try and wrap that up in a sentence or two? Sorry. Over to you. Thanks.
Thanks. Oh God, my mind is going at 1,000,000 miles an hour at the moment. Yeah, so I guess I could start with this shirt that I'm wearing is Farming for the Future. So I am a farmer, but we've been involved in a lot of research. Just briefly, our story goes back about 50 years. We've planted over 250,000 trees on our place. We're also in a region that I guess was settled fairly early with modern agriculture, and my European descendants set about severely modifying the landscape and doing things that we thought science considered to be the best, agriculture considered to be the best practice at the time. And in the process, we broke our ecosystem. So, oops, it's a common theme here. But we've managed to bring our landscape. We've we'd gone from about 30% tree cover down to 5% in our region. 30% was really nice when my ancestors came there. And I'm sure the indigenous farmers before that thought it was pretty good too. But anyway, we broke it. We've managed to get our farm back to about 23%. And in the process, we've learnt a lot more, along with all the exotic species that were brought onto our farm. So farmers, I generally say, they love to grow stuff. They're pretty resilient, pretty flexible, pretty innovative. They'll figure stuff out. I get to go home to my farm, leave all this behind, all the acronyms. Someone was telling me about CBD before, and I thought my accommodation was in the CBD, but it's not Central Business District, apparently. I still don't know what it is. Anyway, this Farming for the Future project was one of the research projects we were involved in, and it's the first time ever that we've actually been able to bring together and understand where sustainability sits, where the best productivity, maximising productivity, the most efficient point for producing an abundant amount of food or fibre between conservation and production at both ends. Because I think we'd all agree there's a bias if you're asked to define what sustainability means. So this is the first time that a bunch of researchers have set out to try and model that using a bunch of metrics that have been around forever. So there's not much that's new. It's, soil health metrics and ground cover and biodiversity, and carbon is one there. It's just one of the many metrics. All the research is available on the Farming for the Future website. This project is now it's the largest natural capital accounting research project in the world. Over 130 farms between 500 and 5,000 hectares have been modelled, which is not an average farm size for a lot of the farmers here. I've just been hearing about the 260 million smallholder farmers in China. Half a hectare farm size apparently is the average. So we're a little bit different in that sense, but it's actually identified, and the research was published only 2 days ago, so very fresh, and it's identified a lot of things that I think a lot of farmers sort of feel, and again, a lot of Indigenous farmers would understand as well. But it's identifying where we can get that balance between the two. So, and the spin-off from that has been, so obviously the banks in Australia are quite interested because they're wanting to know what's happening to their assets, whether we're running them down or improving them. And one of the spin-offs was a benefit of trees on farms. So, and it was fascinating. Again, you can look that up. It was Commonwealth Bank, one of our 4 big banks, and they were able to model and put in, objective metrics, the shade and shelter across farms. And but yeah, I think it's science demonstrating what we've sort of understood for a long while. One of the maps was from a software platform called Downforce. Some of you might have heard of it. A lot of people are trying to use it for modelling carbon in the landscape. But it was just showing shade and shelter during winter. So our cold southwesterlies, shade and shelter across the farm depending on tree heights and topography. And another one was hot winds during summer. So, and it was fascinating to see some of the blank spots were actually where I just put tree planting. So we sort of know a lot of this stuff already. We feel it. Anyway, it's about acknowledging that farmers feel and know a lot of this already, but they're in frameworks that limit the way that they grow things. And we're all just trying to make a living. But yeah, we're still pushing ahead with our tree planting on our farm, but it's really nice that we've got some solid metrics now, and I know that the UN's got a platform, the SEEAA platform. Someone might correct me. It came out in 2012, so I think platforms like that would be great to leverage more and to explain some of this. So one of the goals of this project was to benefit the farmers, and they stuck with that. A lot of people were wanting to commercialise this research, but They kept it as research and wanted it to benefit the farmers. I think, yeah, when I go home and I'm trying to explain all of this, I've got to put it back into terms that relate to farmers day to day. So I'll stop there.
That's great. Thank you very much, Michael. And that's really interesting, this sort of balance, right, between, what science is telling us, what traditional knowledge is telling us, what, your gut as a farmer is telling you, and then having that verified, maybe the tools that, you can use with, increases in technology. But I think it would be great to sort of explore a little bit, maybe Christian, if I can, and just asking you, maybe you could just explain a little bit first the work of the World Rural WRF and is doing in this space across the Rio conventions, and just how we can get that sort of rootsy knowledge, right? That's really going to be able to be able to turn the dial, if you will, on being able to maximize the synergies across the three.
Thank you very much to Australia for issuing this invitation for us to speak at the panel. So as we've mentioned, we are a global network of mainly family farming organizations working across the globe. And we're here because family farming is a proven climate solution, but also it's one of the best examples of how we can connect some of these other targets when we're talking about biodiversity, when we're talking about soil health. Because family farmers across the globe and farmers in general, as Michael has said, are already doing all of this work. And it is sometimes that is not made visible. So a lot of our work has to do with that recognition and has to do to connect from this grassroots action and grassroots level to this global. And then also, as a global network, what we do is work in a coordinated way so that family farming organizations can have a better action when they come to these COPs, when they come to these spaces. They have a common narrative and they have a common position, because we're doing that work of strengthening their capacity, providing some of that information, doing that a bit of translation of how all of these processes connect to their daily lives, why some of the decisions that are made at a COP influence their lives, and what voice they need to have in all of these processes to ensure that whatever is being discussed is connected and it's rooted at the grassroots level. So part of the purpose of our work goes also around the policy frameworks and working policies at the different levels, so global, national, local, and to ensure that you've spoken about how Australia has done their NDCs and their NBSABs, but we have a very broad network, and each country has a very different way of approaching this. So we are trying to build those connections. We're trying to ensure that we're getting the best examples out of all of these plans. How is X and Y country doing this and that can probably be replicated in another and work for the farmers? Because ideally what we want to have is a standard that can work for them, that is easy to understand, and that their contributions are made visible in a very easy way. Because in the end, having plans or targets that work for farmers help the country as well, because you will get more ambition if you have more people on board. So you're probably going to get your targets faster if you're working with them together, and that's a big important part of our work. And finally, I would say, and as a critical element that kind of binds all of this together, is access to resources and climate finance. We're talking about climate finance, but then also how does that connect to the other little pots? Because sometimes it feels like it's a competition amongst where the donors are putting their efforts and their resources, and how can we make sure that farmers are getting that support in an easy way, that it doesn't overburden them, and that it's also sustainable in the long term. And I think family farming overall has a very nice story to tell across the 3 Rio conventions, because it hits all of those targets. It is just that we don't really have, in the current financial architecture, the mechanisms and instruments to be able to scale some of these solutions up. So they remain overlooked, unfortunately. But this is the type of work that we're trying to do, and this is what we do as a network. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Christian. And maybe I could just have George, if you don't mind, just talk a little bit about this idea of the family farmer and the interpreting, the sort of the policies, if you will, and the frameworks that might be coming out of government, but might be coming out of other, initiatives that are trying to make the farming be more efficient, more productive, more responsive and to the environment, and maintaining or improving biodiversity. With guys, what kind of engagement might you have had with sort of the family farmer, the smallholder, to be able to enable them to understand this acceleration and be able to, be part of the initiative to move forward and see those synergies come to life?
Thank you again, Chris. I think that the farmer must be the center of the process. The engagement of farmers is essential for any kind of implementation of technology we can propose or put at disposition of this category. I would like to tell you a history, because we are looking, it's very necessary to the future, but sometimes we need to look to the past for understand what's the progress we did. In Brazil, talking about cattle raising, just a number. If we have the same technology of production of 50 years ago in our country with the actual demand in beef, we should be 2 or 3 times more land dedicated to pastures, to cattle raising than today we have. This is a tremendous progress. This is a spare land effect. It is very, very important. And it's a motivation for us, because we did, and we can do more in the future. All the technologies the Agriculture and Livestock Ministry in Brazil implements for low carbon agriculture is not depending on if we are talking about small or big farmers. It's the same. The implementation is different. Sometimes you can have a different approach, a different assistance, a different support, but the technologies are the same.
Thank you. I mean, maybe, sorry, back to Christian, then, just to expand then a little bit on what are some of the environmental initiatives that, maybe an example that you could share with us from family farmers in your global network that are delivering significant socioeconomic benefits. Maybe a case study you could just quickly sort of whip up for us, just so we can get a taste of what this means. Thanks.
Okay, so the work that we've been doing, it's not new. This recognition of family farming as one of and its connections to sustainable development and all of these targets has already been recognized by the United Nations Decade on Family Farming, which is going from 2019 to 2028. So that has also a pillar on climate, on the socioeconomics as well. So there's an agreement, an international agreement about this. And then when you go back to what our members are doing across the globe, and it's very diverse, but I think the common thread, so we have a farmer here in Brazil, for example, that has a mushroom project, and they're doing that in eucalyptus logs. So they comply with the law because they're not really farming and not degrading the land. They're using it to have the logs where their mushrooms are telling. So they've built their business around this model that kind of like leaves intact their area where they are going. Another of our members in Cameroon is restoring mangroves and ensuring that they're building the new generation of how new fish and new all of these seashells and things that they can eat. And her message is basically leave nature to it. Like, we just put the seedlings there, and we need to let nature have its time to be restored. And also farmers in Eastern Africa are working together with their local schools to create an agroecology school so that future generations are built with this new way of working. And I think two things are like a common thread of all of these cases. And first, I forgot to say, like in the Pacific as well, we're leveraging traditional knowledge. I think it's a bit closer to home, so I didn't want to miss that example. They're doing a lot of the traditional knowledge. They're mixing breadfruit with their local food crops and ensuring that that's not lost. So the common thread of all of these cases is that farmers are going towards like an agroecological transition. They're working towards systems that mix traditional with food, and they're diversifying whatever they're planting. But the other common thread is that they're doing it in an organized way. They all have, or they all are members of a farmer organization that helps them scale, that helps them be their a safety net for them. So I think these two things are very important when you're looking at how to scale some of these solutions. Who do you want to work with? Family farming organizations are already there. They have their knowledge, they have their networks, and sometimes they're feeling overlooked. So I think these two things, if we want to work towards like an agroecological transition, you have the what and you have the who. I think that could be my answer to this. Thank you.
So that's great. I mean, I think just taking on from that, and Maya, maybe just you could help sort of explore this next point, which is that you've got sort of this approach by farmers. You're seeing some trends. Obviously, you've got traditional knowledge. You also have just general practices that have been going on. So when it comes to this issue around access to climate finance, what are some effective strategies that you could kind of share with us, coming from your perspective, to mobilize investment and foster policy coherence? Because I think it's already happening on the ground. So is that something that you reach in and be able to kind of apply up at a policy level? Or often we have policies that then have are not sensible whatsoever and just annoy farmers, and they just kind of do their own thing anyway.
We all respond to incentives, so it's going to be super critical to mobilize resources and think about farmers, smallholder farmers particularly have a half a hectare or 1 hectare. I'm talking about the tropics in in Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, Asia, and Asia and Latin America. In Latin America, the farm sizes are slightly bigger than what you talk about Asia and Africa. But in any case, the incentives are going to be very, very important for changing practices in the long run, and mobilizing resources also require the first question comes is the level of risk, and the data on that risk matrix is very dispersed. So we have quite a lot of work to do in terms of really providing that risk assessments to private sector and other financing organizations to say that. And again, the risk assessments is really very context specific. If you're talking about livestock sector, if you're talking about coffee farm, or if you're talking about the rice cultivation, the risk matrix is quite different. So an organization like ours is really putting more effort in terms of really providing this bank, and we have an impact SF platform which brings some analysis, which brings in available data, multiple data points from a climate, environmental, soil, and also different experience of successful pilots to understand what's the risk matrix that we are looking at, and providing as a kind of being a technical partner to investment organizations and private banks particularly, to see that, so that they have a data-driven approach. It's not perfect, but there have some data points to really tell us like what's the level of risk I'm taking in putting this investment across here. So that's a critical aspect, the data. We still have some work to do in terms of bringing more coherence about, again, multiple types of cropping systems in the tropics, but we need to really constantly bring that together and provide. For smallholder farmers, collateral is very difficult. The cash flow is the one thing that any investment opportunity comes laying that banks will look at what's your cash flow. So we got to figure out also through incentive mechanism, maybe public investments to figure out government's investments to see how do we support this very smallholder farmers who has a very limited income, and putting upfront these kind of cash flow and showing this they might be willing to change the practices, but providing that would be critical. Also a big recognition about, it's a tough one, right? You have to hit the climate target, the biodiversity target, and the desertification target. It's not an easy one, but we are more and more trying in that. So it's a recognition about there's going to be some trade-offs. There's also going to be a lot of synergies. So really understanding from a very context-specific examples to see where the synergies are maximized, and enabling farmers to kind of understand that and take on the risk, and supporting these investors, providing the right tools and data so that they could make investments. And also taking a very long-term approach when it comes to biological diversity. It's not a linear process. You don't see those changes from day one to 1 year to the next year. It requires a long-term approach, and kind of we can walk through the investors from a long-term approach, and also kind of if we can successfully show that these change practices are eventually helping the ecosystem and the livelihoods and bringing some investment back to these investors, we will actually reduce the risk for future investment for the smallholder farmers. So really thinking about how do we actually actively reduce the risk for future investment is going to be also critical. So for me, it's like taking a very long-term approach, recognizing some of the trade-offs and synergies, focusing always on the synergies and reducing the risk. And the risk dimension is something that organization like ours, international organization, really working on, building on, consolidating our data to provide the required information that so very AI enabled and very context specific data points that we can provide and support these investments to flow. But still a long way to go.
So Maya, like terribly practical and sensible comments, and I'd be interested to hear Michael, maybe for a last question before I open it up. But just in terms of sort of this idea of incentives, about risk mitigation strategies, about looking at data, I'd be interested if you could just explain how, possibly, can natural capital accounting bridge the gap, possibly, between environmental sustainability goals and agricultural productivity objectives. What maybe is your experience? Do you do that type of accounting on farm?
Yeah, well, it just happens that over the last year or so, I've become quite involved in trying to get carbon projects off the ground. So that's a form of climate finance coming down to farmers. But yeah, there's definitely a huge shortage of climate finance coming directly to farmers, and I'm really scared that there's going to be a backlash because there's all this stuff coming at farmers. But where's the money? It's not there, and we're already starting to see perverse outcomes from that as well. So there's companies buying up land just to do carbon projects, and that's displacing agriculture, displacing people, and it's not going to help. It's going to make farmers batten down the hatches even more, and so we're actually seeing that in our area. We've been doing a lot of work to try and educate farmers, and we've actually committed to running a whole bunch of just community discussion evenings to try and get farmers in the same room. So I was doing a lot of one-on-one, but to build the trust, it takes time. So I'm probably seen as a bit of an outlier in our area. So they're already suspicious. He's that guy that plants all the trees. But yeah, we're definitely using the natural capital research to try and demonstrate to farmers and explain to them actually how they can improve their productivity. So there's this whole private versus public benefit thing going on, but it's very hard to convince them. Just the private benefit will be enough. Because there's a lot of other pressures. At the moment in my area, the livestock markets are really good. So farmers are making money while they can, because we don't know when that's going to collapse. We don't know when the rain's going to stop. We don't know when the rain's going to flood us out. We don't know. I had 2 months ago, we had a snowstorm with over a foot of snow. That's, I think, last time we had anywhere near that much snow was 1966. So it's not that long ago, but it's huge amount of damage. Like, it's added 6 months to my job list, and yeah, I was scrambling just to get here. But I know how important this is to bring farmers' voices to this arena, and explain this stuff. At the moment, the incentives are not too bad, but they're just building the trust, educating farmers about what it actually means, and I think if we can move it faster, I don't know how. Like, I'm really struggling. Where, like I said, we're doing our best to educate farmers. We're explaining to them the productivity benefits. You talked about long term, you know, but ecosystems do take a long time. We fully recognise that. But farmers are thinking year to year, you know, and in tropical climates, they're thinking month to month. You know, things just change so quick. And, you know, visiting farmers in Borneo last year, and they're losing their ironwoods because they don't have many rhinos anymore to eat the seeds and germinate the seeds. So, and I was saying, well, why aren't you planting more? They're so valuable that it's illegal to export ironwood. Oh, they take too long to grow. And I'm like, so how long's too long? And 25 years. And I'm like, that's compared to Scandinavia, a 60-year, you know, harvest cycle. 25 years is really quick. But for them, in a tropical climate, 25 years is a long time. And especially if you've got instabilities in government and land tenure as well. So we need to move a lot quicker. We need to get that finance to family farmers, to smallholders. We need, I don't know, you guys are the brains.
No, thank you so much. And obviously, you know, it's context specific. You know, something's going to, you know, what's going to work for a farmer in Australia is not going to be the same thing for someone else in another country, farming a different farm in a different environment. Maybe if there's an opportunity, if there's anyone that would like to ask a question, this is a great opportunity to do so.
Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Dr. Yazuddin. I'm representing textile sector from Pakistan. Yeah, this is all the industry we have. But the basis starts from the farms. You know, the cotton is being planted there. So we started working with the Better Cotton initiative, and they have taken it to Regen Cotton. And 30% cotton right now in Pakistan is Better Cotton. So we have less consumptions of fertilizers, and we are working on the carbon footprint. My question is, because it's a long discussion and you guys are invested, and because of you, I'm also invested in it because it's a very important topic. But my question is with Christian. You see, there is intergenerational justice. And we all live where, especially in Pakistan, 70% economy dependent on agroforestry. So how we can collaborate with world rural farms, number one. And the idea, because we have the same idea that school plays a pivotal role. Because this is our responsibility to whatever we have, in knowledge we have, it has to be passed on to them. And they should know what will be the scene in the future generations, you know. So what is their, you know, your take on that, and how we can collaborate with every one of you, because we need you. Why we need you? Because our human development index is 168. We are far behind. Our farmer is illiterate. They never been to the classroom. So this is, I think, being an industry leader, my responsibility, then we all realizes, and we want to try to set up to tell them everything, their rights, and what to do. Like, for example, we're working on biochar because they can make money through biochar. Similarly, agroforestry and other things. So this is my take and a question for you. Thank you, Kristen.
Thank you very much for the question. So the World Rural Forum has a very strong working with youth. It is one of the priorities to bring gender equality and also this intergenerational renewal in the sector, because it is vital to keep family farming alive and to keep producing food for everyone. So there is a network of youth. We have a special person working in the team with the global network of youth farmers that they're also being trained and being very active in participating in different forums such as a COP to be able to articulate better what will their specific needs be, what type of specific policies they would require, And it is a good space for them to be able to talk to their government representatives, talk to the different actors that come to these global spaces, and be able to, just share their stories, tell their narratives, share their demands. And so that is one of the things that we do. And the project that I shared is one of our members that is working in East Africa, and I'm sure that if we can connect what their idea is, and they will probably be able to tell you down to the detail, because to them these projects are their babies, and they are ensuring that the next generation is well fed, that they have better opportunities, and overall their livelihoods are better. So happy to chat after this event has been done, and thank you for the interest and for the question. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I'm afraid we've run out of time. Probably not be able to do any other questions unless people want to have final remarks, short final remarks.
I'm really excited that you're here. Textile Exchange have a mandate to reduce emissions at Tier 4, and they're not here. They couldn't afford to attend. I've got a responsible wool standard. I've explained to them that it's not changing anything on farm. The farmers that are getting certified under some of these certifications are doing it for market access only, and they're doing it because they're already doing those things. They're not. So it's really exciting that you're here at least.
Great. Well, I think we'll have to draw a line in the sand there. Thank you so much, Christian, George, Michael, Maya. Thank you so much for being on this panel, and thank you for joining us. Oh, please.